Right, here I am, a minute early. And what I'm going to speak about, or what we're going to learn about today, either or, is martyrdom, like generically, I guess, or in general, like a brief rundown of some of the most well known. And then I'm going to focus on Alban, who was the first English martyr. And if I have time, I'm going to go on to one other early martyr and her story. So let's take a look overall at the concept and then we'll get on. So the original meaning of the Greek word martys, M-A-R-T-Y-S, was witness. So it didn't mean somebody who died for their cause at that time. In this sense, so in the sense of a witness, it's often used in the New Testament. However, because the most memorable or striking or, emphatic way that a Christian could provide that witness, I guess, or attest to the strength of their witnessing was to die, basically, rather than denying Christ or their faith. So the word soon began to be used in reference to one who wasn't only a witness, but specifically a witness unto death, as it were. And the usage for this in the New Testament is present, at least implicitly, and that is in Acts 22:20 and Revelation 2:13. So the very first Christian martyrs were Stephen, he is the first, and James. So they're both saints, Saint Stephen and Saint James. The story of Stephen's martyrdom is right there in the Bible. And of the apostles so everybody other than John basically came to an, I won't say untimely end, because obviously it's in God's sovereign plan, but they were martyred with the exclusion of John, who lived into relatively old age compared to them at least. But the most important martyrs were Peter and Paul, who were both put to death at the hands of the Romans in Rome. Clement of Rome described them as God's athletes, contending for a heavenly prize, or the heavenly prize, I guess, and also mentions a great multitude who were executed at the same time. And Peter's martyrdom was a little unusual, or unorthodox, as it were, no pun intended, because apparently or allegedly at his own request, he was crucified upside down. But maybe that's a whole new video. So early on in the 2nd century, Ignatius of Antioch described his own upcoming martyrdom as a way of attaining to God. That's his direct quote. And he urged also the Christians in Rome, the Roman Christians, not to make any effort at all to plead on his behalf or to have him spared. And during the first 2 centuries, the persecution hadn't quite gathered pace as it did before it was finally kind of outlawed within Rome, at least. I mean, it's gone on to this day, but it was more sporadic and less methodological, maybe, because martyrdoms were not particularly frequent within those first 2 centuries. However, the martyrs that were highly esteemed by other Christians and held in a place of honor, basically. So Roman emperor wise, as it were, Marcus Aurelius, you may have heard of him, he viewed their constancy or their commitment or their unwavering willingness to die as theatrical, basically. And his government's position was not completely clear either. So it made it easier and sometimes more difficult to ascertain the reasons for the martyrdom, because, it was debated and not settled. Were Christians to be condemned as Christians because of specific charges, or because of the crimes that the Roman state viewed as inherent within the Christian faith? And some of the accusations thrown around were, of course, cannibalism, incest, as a result of the Lord's Supper, and, calling everybody brother and sister. That those were just 2. Atheism was another common charge against Christians because we did not believe in the pantheon, etc. So anyway, they were ordered to prove how they had abandoned Christianity basically, and they would to do so in this manner by offering sacrifices to Roman gods. And the Old Testament for sure is pretty explicit about condemning such practices. So unsurprisingly, they refused to do it en masse and were then executed summarily. So as time went on, there was a fresh emphasis, I guess, on martyrdom, which could and was regarded as a substitute for baptism, interestingly enough. So in the persecutions under Decius, which was the middle of the third, like AD 250, and Diocletian, hopefully you've heard of him in my past videos, he was 4th century, 303 to 311, and that's his rulership, not his life. The authentic acts of the early martyrs were often replaced by legendary accounts, pseudo-epigraphia, just like made up stuff. You know, as an example of this, not one of the versions of the death of Ignatius is genuine. So, and there are many to choose from. The earliest surviving Christian martyrologies are the Syrian Breviarium Syriacum, possibly, and that's AD 411. So that's worth having a look at. There are like various, as I said, Christian persecution. I don't know why my computer's making noises. Christian persecution has continued unabated up until this day. However, we went through, you know, quite a wide ranging. I know what it is. We went through quite a long time in England, at least, for you know, Christian persecution by Christians, and I really should make a video about that. But those are annaled. All those, like for example, the Protestant martyrs. There's I think I have the book actually. It's like just full of them, and of course we martyred quite a few Catholics as well. So yeah, I'll maybe get to that. So that 411. Why am I doing it to myself? The Breviarium Syriacum, and also the Hieronymus. No, it's not. It's the Hieronymian-ish, and that's the mid-5th century, so just slightly after the other one. And that purports to be by Saint Jerome, and that is rejected, that claim, by critics. And Jerome, you may remember, actually, he wasn't quite martyred. He wasn't quite martyred, but he was shot full of arrows and miraculously survived. So then, I can't remember how he actually came to an end. So, yeah, so let's get on to Britain, England more accurately, because there was no... Anyway, so Alban was won to Christ by a fugitive's praise of God, basically. The Roman Emperor Septimus Severus really detested Christianity. I mean, most of his fellows, or predecessors rather, weren't too fond, but he really did hate us and our religion. And when he came to Britain in 208 AD, obviously, he found Christians living there. And furious for this very reason, he ordered them all to be put to the sword. And a Christian priest, who is often given the name Amphibolus, fled before the imperial wrath was meted out. And in the town of Verulam, which is now named St. Albans, you may have like a foreshadowing of why, lived a man called Alban, and he was a high-ranking Roman soldier. And by the way, Christianity came to England via the persecution of Christians, so fleeing the mainland of, you know, Europe as it is now. So something about the behaviour of Amphibolus, the priest, led Alban to offer him shelter. And in spite of his status, I guess, as like a, you know, a wanted, hunted, you know, greatly sought after refugee, Amphibolus, even despite that, he never ever ceased praising God. And his joy was so palpable and so tangible and so real to Alban that Alban was moved by it and by the display of it. And he asked how that could be. You know, how can you be under these circumstances and yet still praise God? and he was, obviously told about Christ and converted to Christianity brilliantly for his own soul. So the governor learned that Alban was harbouring a Christian fugitive at this point, and he sent soldiers to to drag the priest in. They were met by a man in a priestly robe. However, it wasn't Amphibolus, it was Alban. And when the governor saw this, he was apoplectic, basically. He was beyond furious. And since Alban had helped Amphibolus to escape, he said Alban must bear the punishment that was due to the priest who obviously he'd got off. And at that moment, the governor was preparing to pour out a libation, which is a drink offering to his gods, which quite frankly could have been any of the pantheon. And now he ordered Alban to do the same. And obviously that would go against his newfound Christianity. And he even offered to spare him if he would show his loyalty to the old gods, as it were, by doing this libation. And Alban, unsurprisingly, refused. And he said this, he said, "I worship and adore the true and living God who created all things." God bless him. So after he was flogged for that, the governor again asked him to renounce his Christianity, and once more Alban refused. And so the governor ordered his execution at that stage. And according to at least one legend, the place of execution was across a swollen river, and the townsfolk, because they didn't want to see him die, tore down the bridge. However, Alban, desiring to go to God, prayed to be able to cross, and this is why it's called a legend, the river dried up. According to a differing legend, Alban was thirsty and a spring welled up to quench his thirst. So water is a running theme of these legends. Whatever actually happened, the soldier who was ordered and about to behead Alban was so awed that he refused to do his job. So there was definitely something about this new convert, this future saint, that made people at least uneasy or questioning about their own strongly held convictions. So this executioner became a Christian himself on the spot, and that's key to the power of martyrdom. Actually, a second soldier who was found who cut off both of their heads, basically, so it didn't extend. And legend says that the eyes of the soldier who struck the deadly blow immediately fell out. Although, yeah, we like a legend in England. Meanwhile, the priest, back at the ranch, as it were, Amphibolus, heard, hearing that Alban was to die instead of him in his place, he hurried along to the place of execution, maybe ill-advised, and he offered himself up, and guess what? He too was killed. Oh, shucks. So modern research, I guess, in spite of legend, indicates that the deaths took place on the 22nd of June in the year 209. So early 3rd century, before Rome had ceased persecution of Christians. I think it was Constantine's conversion. So impressed by these events, Alban's judge ordered the persecution to stop. So we got a run on that, as it were, to avoid the rush. And although the date and other details there are questions around them, whether they're kind of shaky or not, there's not much doubt, I should say, among scholars that he existed, and that he was a Christian, and that he was a Christian martyr. And his story was known around Verulam, which later became St. Albans, in the century right up after his death, immediately after his death. And he was mentioned in early writings, and churches were built in his honour. And the British historian Gildas and the Saxon historian Bede, who's pretty much more well known, both mention him in their histories, which is also obviously attestation to his existence and martyrdom. So now I think we do have time. We're going to look at, let's see, let me get up to the top. We're going to look at Blandina. I believe I've got a feeling I've made a video about her specifically, but we're going to have a look anyway. So She was a slave girl. She was in an amphitheater. She was tortured. And whilst, in the midst of her pain and suffering and, embarrassment and like all of the other things that must come along with it, her words were recorded as this: I am a Christian and there is nothing vile done by us. So I imagine at that point they were, generally like disparaging Christians. So even though the crowd basically detested Christians, they were forced to admit like that this woman, that basically, I don't think they'd ever seen a woman like it, enduring all of this stuff and still standing firm on the gospel. So that this was in the year 177 AD in Lyon, which was in Gaul, but is obviously now modern day France. Christianity, it was present, but only just. It had first come to Lyon a quarter of a century prior to that, when Polycarp, I hope you've heard of him, of Smyrna, which is now Turkey, had sent Pothinus. And that was he was sent as a missionary to Gaul in its entirety, not specifically Lyon. So Pothinus had established the Church of Christ in Lyon and in nearby Vienne. And as that church grew, the spiritual resistance, which like Satan's pretty well known for, but it became secularized, as it were, and it began to mount. And the persecution of Christians became a feature of this place, whereas previously it hadn't been so. Christians were shut out of their businesses. They were evicted from their houses. They endured all kinds of shame and dishonor and personal injury. Mobs formed to beat them, pretty much like in India nowadays, I guess, or in some places in India. They were stoned, they were robbed, they were just basically mistreated to the extreme. And when believers were arrested and examined by the authorities within that city, they again just boldly confessed their faith in Christ. There was nothing that would deter them from doing so. And they were imprisoned at that point to await the arrival of the governor of the region. So some of the servants of Christians, the housemaids, etc., who were non-Christian, were also, by extension, arrested just for working for Christians. So they were seized and imprisoned, and they feared being tortured. And unfortunately, because their their moral compass wasn't centered in the gospel, they devised, just at the fear of torture, they devised many false accusations against their employers, the Christians, such as the tried and tested cannibalism, incest, obviously, and other much more shameful practices, to be honest. And these accusations, unsurprisingly, to be fair, enraged the mob even more prior to the arrival of the governor. So in this region and in that time, in that year, August the 1st was a holiday, and it was a holiday in remembrance or to celebrate the greatness of Rome and of the emperor. And the governor was expected to be patriotic, or especially patriotic, by sponsoring the entertainment for the entire city, like as a show of, opulence maybe, or whatever. So it was expensive, obviously, to hire gladiators, wrestlers, boxers, other fighting people for these spectacles, this entertainment. However, it would be a lot cheaper to just torture the Christians as part of the holiday entertainment. It's ridiculous. So they were confined in the most awful, darkest, dingiest, dampest, disease-ridden area of the prison. Many of them suffocated there. That's attestation to the conditions that they were placed in. Some were placed in stocks. If anybody's unaware of what stocks are, they're like a wooden couple of cross beams. There's two. Some of them have got holes for feet. Definitely a head hole, as it were, for your neck. So then the wood comes down, then your arms are attached in this fashion, and then potentially your feet, your ankles also. Where I grew up, there used to be some, not in use, obviously, but they were used at least in London, they would the people in the stocks would be pelted with rotten vegetables, etc., for whatever misdemeanor they'd been convicted of. So it was a form of civil punishment. So some of them were placed in stocks. Others were placed in a hot iron seat where their flesh was obviously burned off. And this was literally like a human barbecue. They were chained over a grate of burning coals. So similar to like a pig in a luau, I don't know, like just, roasted meat, basically. An example of this, like barbarous, is that a good enough word? Like, I don't know. This torture instrument is available today if you happen to be in Lyon at the Archaeological Museum there. So it seemed impossible that any Christians would live at this point, having all been tortured so like horrifically, and yet they were strengthened by the Lord, and they exhorted each other and they encouraged each other even then in their faith. So Pothinus, who you remember was the missionary, the 92-year-old bishop of Lyon at this point, he died in his prison cell 2 days after his torture at the judgment seat, which again was the basically sitting and having the flesh of your backside burned off. And that cell as well can be visited today, COVID restrictions notwithstanding. And it's about the size, this instrument, of it's just like teensy. It's like a washing machine or a dishwasher. And that's the cell. That's what he was brought out of. And this is, I guess, how people suffocated, because he would have, he was a bishop of Lyon, so he would have been afforded potentially ever so slightly, preferential treatment. And maybe he got to be in his cell alone. But basically, we're talking not even like 60 centimeters across, maybe, and 80 deep, something like that. Just a cupboard, you couldn't sit down, and you certainly couldn't lie down. And to be fair, it was that cramped that he couldn't have even stood up straight. So it must have just been horrific, although not in comparison to being burned alive. So Sanctus, who is from Vienne at that time, he was a deacon. He stood firm also in his faith, even after these red hot plates, were fastened to, let's go with the most tender parts of his body. And basically he was just one complete bruise and wound. There was not much of him that was uninjured. He was an example, that I'm reading a quote now, for the others, showing that there is nothing fearful where the love of the Father is, and nothing is painful where there is the glory of Christ. And I would add to that, perfect love casts out fear perfectly. So obviously there will be no fear where the Father, where God truly is. Or if there is, it's, it's not needed. So after enduring this torture, some of these Christians who were still standing, at least, were taken to the amphitheatre where they were devoured by wild beasts. And that was in order to entertain the crowd. And among this, so we're getting there now, among the group was the slave girl who I referenced at the beginning. Her name is Blandina, or was Blandina, or still is Blandina, who'd already endured, I've got to tell you, every imaginable cruelty and torture that was available for them to use. She was suspended on a stake. She was exposed to these wild beasts. And because she appeared to be hanging on a cross, and because of the intensity of her prayers, she was an inspiration to other Christians. And when they looked at her, obviously they were reminded of Christ's sacrifice for them and for us. And they would have, it would have come to mind, I assume, that everyone who suffers for the glory of Christ will enjoy eternal fellowship with the living God, basically. None of the beasts touched her at the time, and she was taken down from the stake and cast back into prison. And the Christians believed that God had preserved her for other contests, so that her victory, over this evil might be greater when it came. So on the last day of the contests in the amphitheatre, Blandina was again brought in with Ponticus, who was a boy around 15 years of age at the time. And every day they'd been brought to witness the sufferings of the others, basically, and pressed to deny their faith and to swear by these idols. Ponticus died first of the two. Blandina remained to the last. She'd encouraged basically everyone at that point, or all the Christians at least, and she saw them, going on ahead of her to Christ. And so now that she knew she was the last, she was also ready to go. And she faced her death rejoicing, as if being called to the wedding feast as opposed to wild beasts. So the report stated that after the scourging and after the wild beasts, after the roasting seat, she was finally enclosed in a net and thrown in front of a bull. Having been tossed around by the animal, but this is the report of the time, but feeling none of the things that were happening to her on account of her hope and firm hold upon what she had been entrusted, and her communion with Christ, she also was sacrificed. Big in the game, this woman. So after the bodies of the witnesses were exposed, then for 6 days, they were burned to ashes and thrown into the Rhone River. And the bodies of those who'd suffocated in prison were thrown to the dogs, and guards were stationed to prevent the remaining Christians who were living from burying them even, because they just deserved no respect whatsoever. And the pagans hoped that by these events they would prevent the hope of the resurrection, basically the hope that we have in Christ. They'd obviously not read that there is no greater love than that a man lays down his life for that of his friends, because maybe they should have been reading more or learning to read, or just stop being pagans basically. But so I think I'm going to stop there, because it's pretty distressing really. She's pretty impressive as it goes. Like, if you have to be martyred, go out in style, I guess. I don't know, like just literally savaged by a wild beast, have your backside burnt off, like hung on a cross, all of this stuff, and then just netted up like some sort of, I don't know what, and chucked in front of a raging bull. But apart from that, she was having a good day, because she was rejoicing anyway. I bet they were really ticked off with her. So I'm back in the room anyway. I can see the live chat. If anyone, I can't say that I'm an expert on martyrdom. Hopefully I'll never get to try it out. But I think I could do a good job of answering any questions if they're not like very specific. Or and I guess I'm going to say any other topic, but I may regret that and then change my mind. Yes, Martin, a Don. I would say like she's gangster, but obviously she wouldn't commit a crime, but she's just up there. She's one of my new, not idols, obviously that'd be ridiculous, heroines. She's not new anyway. Her Perpetua as well. If you look to my video on Perpetua, she was pretty big in the game. Armor of God. Do you know what? Unfortunately, even though I'm reading that out, like with ancestral pride, I don't know. Like it's just go to Nigeria and start preaching. Not you personally, but we're not. We maybe in the West are blessed these days, but Nigerian Christians are being murdered every single day, macheted, set on fire, raped, dismembered, the works basically. And it's now got to be pushing 40,000 in the last 10 years, and no one gives a shizzle, it seems. Well, not the mainstream anyway. Britain, I guess I'm being unfair, we stopped our aid to Nigeria, and not only that, it's not only because we're a bit skint maybe, but also because we reference the genocide of Christians. So if your country, not just you, Armor of God, but if your country hasn't done that yet, like I'll write the letter if you want to sign it and send it into your ambassador there. Although I must say the Nigerian embassy here, they're not that forthcoming with the niceties. They don't really respond. However, like your ambassador to there would be the one to go for. Yeah, this side of the world, although it is coming to a theatre near you, as it were. I mean, Yeah, Christian, there's nowhere I don't. Christianity even is globally the most persecuted religion, although one could argue that obviously we are the world's biggest religion, full stop. So you would expect the numbers to be appreciably higher. However, 340 million Christians live in countries which have high to extreme levels of persecution. And those obviously include false imprisonment. If you just look to Pakistan, execution. If you look again to Pakistan or Nigeria, Chad, Niger, North Korea, China. Yeah, and it does seem that way, armor of God, it is coming. However, I will die without my hands tied. Like, I know that much. I won't be on my knees. And I definitely won't be refuting any sort of Christianity or denying Jesus at the time. And that would be silly. So, is that a question for me? The last one there, Liberty. Okay, the Catholic Church, that's a little bit different to the Roman Catholic Church. So Catholic as in the word Catholic and apostolic, that's not all one word. The word Catholic in the Nicene Creed simply means universal, the universal church, the unified universal church of Jesus Christ, like us Christians. That's funny, Jeff. However, at the fall of Rome, so basically the Roman Catholic Church gained prominence within the 4th century. So that's an answer to your question. That's a true answer to your question. Although those little Roman Catholics, they may say at the time of Peter, Jesus, you know what I mean? Like, but no, in real life, the 4th century, there were Catholic churches before that, but we were all Catholic. So it was a bit redundant. But the Roman Catholic Church could not have achieved the prominence it did before the fall of Rome for obvious reasons, because they were polytheists. So I hope that answers your question. Love a Catholic. That I love Christians in general, me. I'm commanded to, obviously, so I'm not bigging myself up, but I do anyway. They're quite funny, some of them. China is a hellhole of godlessness in terms of, I don't know why I'm shouting at you, armor of God. Yeah, they're just gone. They're just lost. They're godless to the extreme. Thank you, Victoria. What's your question? Oh, wow. So the question for anyone who can't see the live chat yet because it has not processed or something like that is, what Christian community do you believe needs the most prayer? Wow. The persecuted Christian community, genuinely persecuted. Non-denominational. I don't say that, you know, Orthodoxy needs more prayers than Catholicism or various branches of Protestantism. Anyone who is in real and present danger of like losing limbs, having their head chopped off, etc., for confessing Christ. We saw the last roundup I did. I feel absolutely awful. I can't remember. I think it was in Ghana. Was it Ghana? Shucks. I read so many. The guy was invited to a debate by Muslims, and he went, and he had his son with him. And as they were walking away, after people committed themselves to Christ as a result of his words, so like glory for that, they beheaded him after he'd left, after they basically entrapped him, like, you know, and his son, fortunately and unfortunately, didn't see the beheading because he ran away. But when his family came back, they all found him, like, I think he was dumped behind some dustbins, pretty charmingly. Sorry, I'm just reading the thingy. Yeah, I'm not going to answer that question. Yeah, I'm not sure about the martyrdom of Peter. It's a bit of a contentious topic. I've got nothing against Peter. Yeah, like whatever has happened, you know, with claims to his authority, genuine or otherwise, is not to do with him. Although it is a bizarre, like, martyrdom request. However, if the accounts are to be relied upon, he had his reasoning. Whether it was sound or not is another thing. I don't think there was any. I don't think that Satan got involved, like at that point and asked him to do, like, I think potentially the symbolism of an inverted crucifix has come at a much later date, because just to be able to choose, like, is pretty impressive, as it were. I think that things are attributed with meaning after the events that, you know, that quite rightfully could have had Satan, you know, causing him to be martyred in the first place. So, Mohammed, what's your... I'd love some evidence of that, Mohammed. Mohammed says the three Abrahamic faiths, I would contest that. There's only two. But anyway, the three Abrahamic faiths are being attacked by all angles, by the Zionist atheist ISIS. I don't know why ISIS is thrown in there, because they are religious, and according to you, Abrahamic, and Christian fanatics, apparently, with just hate for Muslims for some reason. I'm going to say that some reason is because that's nonsense. Again, Christianity is the most persecuted religion. Muslims are very, very rarely persecuted by Christians, because our two greatest commandments are love. So I'd love your evidence for that. And I'm not saying that there aren't, you know, in Nigeria, for example, like violence between Christians and Muslims, because obviously if you think someone's about to roll up on your village and set it on fire and kidnap all the girls out of the school, you might be a bit aggy. I don't know, like, call me crazy. But yeah, I'd like mostly... the most commonly known of Muslim persecution anyway is the Uyghurs, and that's by a godless state. That's, so you're right in saying that, the atheist persecution, but that's nothing to do with Christianity. So sorry, Mohammed, I usually, like, yeah, sorry. And it's not Abrahamic. So unless you can give me some evidence, I don't know. Right. Jesus Christ saves. Let's have a look at the verse. Which can you give me a reference, please? Jesus Christ saves, and I'll take a little look, because broadly speaking, I think it's proper to interpret by the discernment and illumination of the Spirit. You know what I mean? So that's not to say that everybody gets a uniform reading, because God meets us where we are. So, for example, my first entire read through of the Bible, I won't say like opposing, but I got different, let's say, understanding to the ones I get now. Like, oftentimes now I'm going back through verses that I've read many, many times, and then I'll just get another layer of like, oh, that's what it means. You know what I mean? Like, the more in touch you are with the Holy Spirit, in my estimation at least, you get the meat even in the milk. Like, it's just, you know, like precept upon precept and line upon line, you get these deeper understandings, I guess. But yeah, if you can give me a reference, and I'll look at it while I'm doing the stream. Jesus Christ saves. Brilliant name. Faith rationale. I don't know if you're answering somebody else. Okay. Mohammed, you do not believe in my Islam of ISIS. Well, problematically for you, Islamic State in Syria, or even IS or Al Qaeda or Boko Haram or ISWOB or ISCAP or Fulani militants, who are not just herdsmen, obviously they're jihadis, they all claim the Quran as their source of inspiration. So I'd say take it up with them, not me. I'm not like, clearly they're not Buddhist, and I'm just going around saying they're Islamist. They are Islamist. Hezbollah, Hamas, you know, they are Islamists. What do you want me to do about it? Take it out with the Buddhists. Yeah, I'm just reading somebody else's comment. Yeah, Mohammed, potentially this is not the forum for like his, you know, like the victimhood of Islam at the moment, because you know, we all have histories of being persecuted as Christians. Basically, this country, like I said, was mainly Christians against Christians because of the fact that we were all Christian. However, it's yeah, I think Islam gets a pretty fair deal in the mainstream when it comes to, you know, any little thing. So, right. ISIS, Jamie, ISIS stands for Islamic State in Syria. Last time I checked, there may have been a meeting. IS, obviously, is Islamic State. ISWAP is Islamic State Western African Province. Boko Haram is Western Education Forbidden, or like vaguely. It doesn't matter about 99.9% of Sunnah. I'm guessing you mean Sunni Muslims. Really does not matter one bit. And I'd love to know where you pulled that statistic out of. Like, I'd give you a suggestion, because 99.9%, the only real statistic for that is the amount of germs that certain bleaches claim to kill. It's not my belief. Again, I am the Quran. I reject the Quran even as scripture. It's not my belief. These people who are killing my brothers and sisters on a daily, they claim that they are following Surah 929, Surah 850. Like, come on, don't be ridiculous. It's nothing to do with my assessment of the situation. They've never met me. They don't know what I think. They're still doing it at the rate of thousands every year. Little children with machetes hanging out of their head. Like, how much more explicit do you want it? Dismemberments, buried alive, raped, set on fire. You know, not like I say, because of Buddhism at all. Not one of them is talking about, you know, Buddha. Thank you, Jeff. I do get a little bit like aggy, sorry. Yeah, I'd just ignore Rick Cherokee if I were you. I've been doing it for a good while now. Can't answer one single question. Cannot. Offered to debate me, and I just asked casually, like, oh, do you have a faith? I've still not got an answer. I've only asked it about 50 times now. So whenever I start hearing the silly polemics or seeing them or can be bothered to respond, I just respond with, what's your faith? Because can't answer a single question. Anywho, I'd just like to say, where is this 90? Mohammed, I was just about to vouchsafe for you again. I like your presence. I'm encouraged by the fact that you come and you're not like, you know, confrontational and victim status playing. However, I'd love to know where you get the figure 99.9, because to put a percentage next to it gives it an air of authority, as if there's been some survey. And yet I know personally many Muslims who don't jump to denounce anything that Muhammad has deemed, you know, the Quran itself says, thou shalt not forbid that which we have deemed permissible. Like literally, that Sheikh guy who's, you know, David has been having the back and forth with, I saw a tweet of his where someone was saying, so let's be clear, you approve of, if they, meaning the Jews and Christians obviously, won't pay the jizya, you agree that their women should be taken and the yada, yada, yada. And he said, because he couldn't spell, of course. I thought you knew that. Like, so he must be the 0.1%, I guess, Muhammad. Who knows? Why would you want to be in a religion where there's even 0.1% going around raping and selling women as slaves and keeping black people as slaves and trading in that and worshipping idols and waiting for a time when the rocks are going to shout out, here's a Jew? Like, give me a break, please, anytime soon. Mohammed, don't please K me. Like, seriously, you're telling me that this 0.1% of Sunni, or those who follow the Sunnah, which Shias would say that's them as well, by the way. You're telling me this 0.1% is putting 300. No, that's an unfair statistic. Has murdered 40,000 Christians in the last 10 years. But on the other hand, you're telling me that they're not Muslims, so they can't be the 0.1%. So who are these Buddhist like imposters? I don't know what you mean. What do you mean, please K? Please them. Go and ask them to stop it. They're giving you a bad name. And you're not denouncing them either. You're veering between two arguments. One, it's not them. Or two, it's only a very tiny percentage of a certain denomination of Islam. Like, be reasonable. I'm talking about little babies with machetes hanging out of their head. Like, does it move you to any sort of like generic repentance on behalf of your fellow adherents? Like, come on. Anyway, let me just take a sip of my drink before I start getting on my high horse. No, they're not actually going against their religion, Jamie. You're correct. Potentially, they're going outside of the limits of the imagination of the Quran. They're not only crucifying and cutting from here and here. Yes, it is. Sharia is pretty brutal. I don't know if everybody's read The Reliance of the Traveller. I've got an absolute classic. I can't even begin to repeat any of it in this stream. I can allude to it. It's giving the punishment or non-punishment for a man who, I don't think any of it's like PG rated. Having relations with a dead lady, a live one, coming in by the back door, let's say it like that. 2 women, if you own one of them or part of one of them, or your sister, or like, there's a whole list of things, orgies, etc. And and it lets us, luckily, we can see the punishment that's due. And let me tell you, it's not much at all. But yeah, that's Sharia. Bless it. Yeah, faith rationale, I agree. If it was only, this 0.1%, not even 1%, then why aren't all the other Muslims as validated by the Quran, like taking up arms against them and condemning them as like infidels and kafir? Basically, if as a Muslim you can put your hand on your heart and say they are not of me, they are not following the Quran, even though I can give you the verses that they are following. If you can confidently assert that in all truth and not taqiyya, then you better like start denouncing them, people, Muslim people. Go for it. Like, join me, as it were, in calling them out for the utter cretins that they are. I think you probably mean the emigration of Middle Eastern Christians and Pakistani Christians. There's no who, I think there's a what. I mean, for example, Palestinian Christians, I know that's not specifically your question, but they cite other reasons other than so they've got obviously the Jewish state issue as Palestinians, but also they have the second class dimitude or whatever, as opposed to their like Muslim, fellow citizens. But they often cite like educational opportunities, etc., when they want to move, and they have moved en masse out of Palestine in the last, I don't know, few decades. They're down to now they're just in their thousands. They used to be the tens of thousands, and prior to that, many, many more, and it's a shame. Okay, then. So I think that Jesus Christ Saves didn't get me that reference, but you can drop it in the comment section. Maybe he's buried in a Bible at the moment, like trying to find it, or just got carried away reading it. It happens to me. Arabs, armor of God. That's the answer to that question. Glad you asked. Yeah. Any like last questions? And otherwise I'll wrap up. Remember Blandina, bless her. That is pretty courageous. And I'm not saying it's more impressive, because that would be kind of sexist, but it's, women are traditionally seen as the weaker or the fairer sex, as it were. But she gave a lot of their men a run for their money, I reckon, in the like sheer grit and determination and like, professing Christ to the end. God bless her. Yes, it does, Jane. Maybe that's the next video I'll do. I'm going to do something with apostate prophet again soon. Maybe I'll suggest that. And just run through some concepts about necrophilia and and all sorts. But again, probably, I mean, there's a few schools of Sharia, as it were. Probably everyone will go, oh, no, but that's not my one. You know, it's just 99% of we're, you know, all that old twaddle. Yes, Jeff. Yeah, the thing is, women have got different sources of strength. Maybe not. I don't mean other than God. I mean like you know, childbirth, etc. We've got different resources for enduring. We've got higher pain thresholds, etc. On, you know, in general. Just look at any man flu victim, and you'll know what I mean. I'm guessing, Liberty, that potentially you were born in Britain, so this is the bounds of your habitation, like these fair isles. If you weren't, then of course that's a different matter. But God puts us where He chooses us to be, that's for sure. And He will, you know, doesn't mean don't ever move or don't be anywhere else, but God puts us at the place where His plan for us is most likely to come to fruition. Obviously, it'd be silly otherwise, wouldn't it? If that was not the case. Yes, and please do refrain from spamming. Once people have got, they get it, they read it. Just because they don't respond, maybe they don't have much to say on it. You don't need to keep copy pasting. Okay then. So yeah, shortly, not today, shortly, because hashtag I'm avoiding uni work like a professional. All my cupboards have been cleaned out. Like it's I'm getting good at finding like genuine reasons why I can't do it. But this one, I was responding to you, Liberty, and now I've moved on. But this one, I really do have to do it. It's due in, and yeah, I paid money to do it. It's not like I'm at school and I can say it's so unfair. So I shan't say that. I will jolly well soldier on. Yeah, that's what I'll do. And potentially smile while I'm doing it, although it could be a grimace. I don't know. But once it's done, that's the joy. Now, once it's done and you've sent it off and you think, I never have to think about that topic ever again. So, yeah, that's pretty satisfying. It's worth the blood, sweat and tears, as it were. Okay, I'm getting quite dramatic now. I just mentioned blood in relation to, like, a written assignment. So I think it's time to call it a day. Train, what is it? Train rail? I can't even read that. Hold on. Yeah. Is it really the time you need to say that? I'm going to hide the comment just for decency. But thank you very much anyway. Okay then. Right. God bless you all, and I will see you soon. Yeah. Just if you do have suggestions for topics, obviously religious ones that you'd like covered, please do feel free. I will give preference to channel members, obviously, or those on Patreon, or you know, admins, etc. And that doesn't mean I won't get around to all of them, quite frankly, because it's an everyday thing other than sometimes Saturdays. So yeah, I will endeavour to get around to them. Yeah, and maybe we'll start a new schedule, because I came away from the old one, which was like church history on a Monday, polemics on a Tuesday. Maybe I'll make a new one. All right then, anyway, God bless and lots of love, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.